spent years building his lakeside home. He says recently he was persuaded to sign it over to his granddaughter and was told he could live out his days there.
And all of a sudden she just like a, I don't know what, snap of the finger, she changed. She got money hungry.
His granddaughter tried to evict him and sell the property.
Arthur was absolutely at risk of homelessness. He was also completely impoverished because this land and house is the only thing of any value he owned in the world.
Dennis Colley Green's lawyer says financial exploitation of seniors is all too common and often goes unreported. A Consumer Reports investigation finds theft and fraud by loved ones is on the rise.
Caregivers, family members, neighbors, they can use all kinds of tactics to raid their assets.
They can be as obvious as forging signatures on checks, begging for loans that are never paid back, or abusing power of attorney.
When you give power of attorney to somebody, it can give them unfettered access to your accounts. Somebody who misuses those can do real damage, and that's a real problem for the elderly.
Consumer Reports says to help prevent elder abuse, have bank and investment statements sent to a person you trust to monitor accounts, arrange for direct deposit and automatic bill pay, and consult a reputable elder law attorney for advice on wills and limiting power of attorney. Fortunately for Arthur, a legal services program for the elderly he consulted obtained a court order voiding the granddaughter's deed, returning the property to him. If you would like some resources to help prevent financial abuse to the elderly, you can head to our website.
Wow, guys. Welcome to my channel. This is Queen C. Pinkston, your caregiver supporter, and we are dealing with a difficult topic today by request of elder abuse. And we have a couple of clips that we want to share with you today, and that was the first one. But before we do, what is elder abuse? What is it about? So elder abuse, including cases involving adult children, is a deeply sensitive issue. Abuse can take many forms: physical, emotional, financial, or neglect, and addressing it requires understanding, support, and action. And some steps to recognize that, we'll go over those at the end of our next clip if we can. Let's go and see, can we watch another clip? And if you identify with elder abuse in any way, are you aware of it? We're going to have, we have hotlines, and we have actual resources that you can call and report to get help there. Okay, so we're going to give those to you, and we're also going to have them in the description box. And these are local. Some are right here for Rochester, New York, where I am, and then some are national. It depends on where you are located that you may be able to get help. One of the scriptures that my mom used, and one of the scriptures that blesses me when it comes to the honoring the elderly, if you allow me, is Ephesians chapter 6. And it is starting with verse 1. And it says, "Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right." And then the second verse, it says to honor thy father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. To honor your father and your mother, which is the first commandment with promise. Verse 3, that it may be well with thee and thou may live long upon the earth. My mom taught me that verse, and she lived by that verse. And I always believed that God honored her because she lived to be 101 years old. Let's see, can we get another clip here to help us see something about this elder abuse, if we can.
Spent years building his lakeside home.
Okay, that one we just did. I'm sorry. Let's get another clip here. We'll be right back. All right. Okay, let's get another clip. I think we got this one here.
Today's topic is...
Yeah, we need help.
It's about elder abuse. World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was June 15th, 2020. And it prompted me to think a little bit more about elder abuse. It can be tough to recognize, even as somebody who works with older adults all the time. So in this video, we'll define what elder abuse is and the different types of it, what the risk factors for elder abuse, how you might be able to detect it, and then what to do about it. Elder abuse was actually defined by the World Health Organization in 2011. It's a single or repeated act or lack of appropriate action occurring with any relationship where there's an expectation of trust, which causes harm or distress to an older person. So that sounds pretty straightforward, but it can be complicated and kind of nuanced, especially because a lot of times the person who is the abuser is a family member or a loved one of the person, the older person. So it can be complex. Elder abuse can be in many forms. It can be physical, emotional or psychological, financial, and it can also include neglect. So that would be not supplying some care that a person might need, or some supplies that they might need, like medical supplies, or medicine, or even food, water, shelter, supervision, things like that. Elder abuse can take place in a person's home, and it could also take place in the older person's home or the family member's home, or in an institution like a long-term care home or a nursing home. We're hearing some information about neglect and abuse that might have been going on in long-term care, especially during COVID, and it's extremely frightening and disturbing. A 2015 study of the prevalence of elder abuse found that about 10% of people over the age of 65 in North and South America were victims of elder abuse. That number went up to about 47% if somebody was living with dementia. There are risk factors for elder abuse. So if a person's over 80, if they have cognitive impairment, if they have more disability, that can increase the risk that a person will have elder abuse inflicted on them. Other things that can put a person at risk include things like a socioeconomic factor. So if somebody has less financial resources, that can really put a person at higher risk of financial abuse for sure, especially if the abuser is dependent on the older adult for money or shelter. There are factors about the family that can increase the risk of abuse. So if there are sort of family stressors going on, like somebody being very ill, or sometimes we see families where both of the elders in a marriage are have a lot of disability, and maybe both of them are living with dementia. So that can increase the risk of abuse. And so can factors about the care partner. So if an older adult is relying on somebody who maybe has a history of mental illness themselves, now that's not to say that people with mental illness can't be good caregivers and are more likely to be abusive, but it's a risk factor because someone who isn't well themselves might not be able to meet a person's care needs, and they might be more likely to end up being in a situation where there's some abuse or exploitation or neglect. Substance abuse is another thing that can increase the risk of abuse. So that could be substance abuse on the part of the older adult or on the part of the care partner. And that might be a sign. Sometimes when we see substance abuse, if we're doctors or nurses, geriatricians included, if you see someone who is abusing a certain substance, it's probably good to think about, is there any kind of an abuse situation that is promoting the older person to drink or to use a substance as a way of escaping? It can be hard to detect the physical signs of elder abuse. And that can be because older adults can sometimes have those signs for other reasons, and we don't want to jump to conclusions. It can be hard to detect signs of elder abuse because some of the things that we would be looking for, like fractures or bruising or cuts or tears, we might call them lacerations in the skin, somebody not getting their medications properly or having weight loss or malnutrition. Some of those things can be caused by other medical conditions or things that are going on with the person. So they could be signs of abuse, but they could also be related to other health issues. And we don't want to jump to conclusions, but that's why it's really important, and it usually takes an interprofessional team to kind of diligently look for those other causes and make sure that that's not the cause of the injury. It's really usually that we notice a pattern. So if we're noticing repeated issues, without a very good explanation, that might make us think about elder abuse. Elder abuse is serious, so not only can it cause injuries that can be painful and can be debilitating, it can also increase the risk of death, and it actually does. So people who report abuse are more likely to die than people who don't, and that's especially true of older women. So if elder abuse is happening or neglect, it's important to know about it and to take steps to stop it. Just like with other kinds of abuse, it can be underreported. And that could be especially true when it comes to elder abuse, because there could be factors that are making the person at higher risk for abuse that are getting in the way of the person's ability to report that abuse. So, for example, if someone's living with dementia, it might be harder for the person to know the steps to take or to have clarity about what exactly is happening. And even if short-term memory is affected, a person might not remember who did the abuse or even that it happened, and might come up with another more benign explanation for the injury that was experienced. So it's really difficult. I know that some people have become very fearful, especially when it comes to abuse by that might happen by a caregiver in the home, for example, like a paid caregiver or in long-term care or something like that. So a lot of people are using video cameras and other ways of checking in to make sure that the care that the older person is receiving isn't abusive and is appropriate. I can't necessarily argue with that. I think ideally that would be done with everybody's consent and knowledge. But if there are significant concerns about safety, I think it can be okay to do that kind of monitoring. It's really important to ensure the privacy of the older adult as well, though. So if an older adult is receiving intimate care, for example, that's not necessarily something that you want to monitor in a video type of way. So I think a best effort should be made to get consent, but it's really important to take some of those safeguards to protect someone. If you feel like you're being abused, you can always call the police. Elder abuse is almost always a crime, but it does depend a little bit on the jurisdiction that you live in. Some older adults are afraid to call the police because they're worried that if they're being abused by a family member, that family member might end up in jail. And it's very complicated. Even though abuse is taking place, it still might be the case that you don't want your son or your grandson or daughter to actually go to prison or have charges. And so oftentimes when somebody calls the police because they're worried about abuse, an elder abuse team might come on the scene. And so that's not necessarily the police, like in the TV show Cops, but usually there's a health professional as well. So I know locally my elder abuse team has a nurse and a police officer. And they usually work together to try to get the older person to safety, but also to resolve the situation so that it's not likely to happen again. So it doesn't always result in charges. But abuse isn't right. And so if seeking help means that there's negative consequences for the abuser, that can sometimes be the right thing, even though it's difficult.
Wow.
Thanks.
Wow, guys. This is really something that we're talking about
Today's topic
today.
is difficult. It's about elder abuse.
Elder abuse, and
World Elder Abuse Awareness
we
Day
want
was
to
June 15th, 2020.
we want to not bring that
And
clip
it
back.
prompted me to think a little bit
We're
more.
going to stop that one.
Spent years building his lakeside home.
So
He
we've
says
seen
recently
these.
he was persuaded to sign it over to his granddaughter.
Today's topic is difficult.
I think we have them
It's
all.
about elder
All right.
abuse.
So let's just talk about this for a minute. How did you feel about the clips that we saw in the first one with the father, the grandfather there with his daughter, granddaughter, or daughter? It can be a father, it can be a daughter, it can be a granddaughter, it can be a niece, it can be a nephew, it can be a stepchild, it can be anyone. But he had sign over the power of attorney to her, and it ended up with her almost putting him outside, with him almost not having a place to live, you know. Um, and thank God for the attorneys and for him being able to get assistance. He was able to maintain his place to dwell. I mean, this is not a joke. Um, and how often do we think about elder abuse? Um, I really didn't think about it until my girlfriend sent me a note, and I said, "Whoa, let me do some research on this. This is really something." And I have tons and tons of research. Obviously, we won't be able to do it all today, but I want to make sure that you get some information today. Um, Actually, I want to. There's a couple of things I have here, and it talks about. I have some resources here, and a video explaining the types of elder abuse, and we went over that. She discussed that. I don't know if she went over it so quick. I don't know if you hear it clearly, but the first one she was mentioned, I believe, was physical abuse, and that is harmful physical actions like hitting, pushing, or improper use of restraints. What is a restraint? If a person arms are moving back and forth, and you can't control them or whatever the case may be. Restraints can work. Sometimes you can be scratching yourself. You can be doing something that will harm yourself. Um, if you have a nasal tube in or a tube in your throat or something and you're pulling and pulling and pulling, they're only allowed to do a minimal amount of restraint to help you um, to keep you from hurting yourself and from hurting others is the only thing that's legal with that. But if they're improperly used, where they can cause the patient harm, bruise, or access, you're accessing, you're causing breaking of the skin or something of that sort, limbs or anything of that sort. That is not okay. Another one is emotional abuse. That's verbal assault. Verbal assault. That's when you are verbally yelling, swearing, saying things at your loved ones. And that is abuse. It is not okay. Threats, threatening them to do something to them, um, that is not okay. Or isolating the elderly from loved ones, putting them into, you can only be in this area, in this room, and you're not allowed to come out. Or you can only come out maybe to use the facilities and you must go back into your room, or this type of a thing. That's a form of abuse. That is not okay. Um, why do we even want to abuse the elderly? I mean, it is um, so hard to comprehend. There was a clip, and I don't know what happened to it. I did have another clip where it was explaining about family members abusing others and how hard it is for a loved one to want to report your kids or your grandkids or whomever is caring for you because, oh man, I'm so sorry. I'm going to look again and see can I find that clip. I couldn't find that one. But just as a parent, and you're like, do I really want to turn them in? Do I really want to do this? Right? Um, one parent was questioning her, like, what did I do so much as a parent? Was I such a terrible mom? You know what I mean? That I would raise my kids where they would want to abuse me now, or my stepkids, or whatever the case may be. What is this, right? And some of you probably like me, you would think I would never, ever, ever consider the thought of abusing my loved one, abusing any elderly person, period. The thought sometimes is just overwhelming. Um, there's another one. So we talked about there's physical abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's sexual abuse of the elderly. I can't envision anyone sexually abusing my mom, my precious mom right here. I can't, the thought of anyone sexually abusing her, the thought, really? It says any non consensual sexual contact or exploitation. They're elderly, they're 70, 80, maybe 90, maybe even 100 years old. And if they're not in their right mind, sound mind, um, you got to make sure that there's no dementia there. You got to make sure that there's no Alzheimer's there. You got to make sure that they are able to think properly and make the proper decision. Now, there are some videos out where some people at 90 years old and 100 years old that are getting remarried, and I'm sure that can happen. But they need to be, it says here, it has to be consensual, not non consensual. They're not being taken advantage of. Wow, that's hard to even comprehend. Sexual abuse. This is a big, big, big one here. Financial abuse. Financial abuse. Now, remember the gentleman with the house, and that would have been in the line of financial abuse because his investment is in his home. He's thinking that this is what I've done. I've invested, built this house. I'm going to be able to live here until I die. And all of a sudden now you've been threatened that you got to get out of your house. Whoa. And you've been threatened by someone that you trusted, someone maybe that you helped raise, someone that you cared for. And all of a sudden now you got to do what? Where are you going? What? This is incomprehensible. Where am I going? This was what I planned on right here. Investing in this is it. I put my savings in here and I invested in here. So what are you telling me? Where am I going? My water, guys. Guys, if you hear some background noise, the wind is really blowing outside. And I know the contractors are working, so I don't know. There you go. If you hear something, that's what it is. Apologize for that. Where are you going? Where are you going? Yes, that's the question. That's the question. Okay, no one's there. All right. So let's continue. Financial abuse, misuse of an elder's funds, misuse of their property, misuse of their assets. That is financial abuse. If they have trusted you with their social security check, they've trusted you with their pension, they've trusted you with whatever their bank accounts or whatever it is that they have, and now you are misusing it, or you're threatening them, or you're telling them they need to give you extra money, and this is wrong. This is totally, totally, totally wrong. It is abuse. It is abuse. Okay. So now we're up to what? With physical abuse is wrong. Emotional abuse is wrong. Sexual abuse without consent is wrong. Financial abuse is wrong. Guys, abuse is wrong as far as I'm concerned. Now we're looking at neglect. Neglect, really? So that's failing to provide basic needs like food, shelter, or medical care. Guys, failing to provide basic needs like food to our elderly, like shelter, like getting them the medical care that they need. Someone asked a question one time. They say, "Is it okay to be angry as a follower of Christ?" Yes, it is okay to be angry as a follower of Christ. And he got angry, and that makes all of these things right here. If you want me to be angry as a follower of Christ, this makes me angry to think about anyone. Would this how would you not give somebody basic food, shelter, and try to get them their medical care? How would you come in and abuse their funds or their property that they worked for all of their lives or their assets? Just who? Yes, that would make me angry. As a follower of Christ, that would make me angry. The Bible says, be angry and sin not. This makes me angry to think about anyone doing any of this. I was determined to care for my mom. And guys, don't get tired of me saying it because I'm going to say it as long as I live. I was determined to care for my mother. And I knew at her age, at 101, the new people, that's my mom. And I knew at 101, prior to 101, I didn't want her to want for anything. Nothing here. No physical abuse, nothing. Nobody was going to hit her, punish her, or improperly put restraints on her. Nobody was going to verbally assault her in any way. If I knew anything about her being isolated, it weren't going to happen. And she was with me, so I know that didn't happen when she was with me. In financial abuse, no, no, no. Her funds were cared for. Her funds was cared for. And when she weren't able to handle them, we cared for them. I made sure that whatever little funds that she received, and by the way, the elderly a lot of times don't have a lot of funds. Okay? Sometimes it's just their Social Security, which you're trying to take away. Sometimes it's just the Social Security. Sometimes it's just a survival Social Security. What is survival Social Security? Yeah, sure, I'll tell you. Survival Social Security is what my mother received because she never worked. She never worked to pay in Social Security. They did domestic work, house cleaning, laundry, babysitting, working on the farm, doing these types of things. So they were not paying in Social Security. So therefore, there was no Social Security to withdraw. But by God's grace, she remarried, and her husband had worked on the railroad. So therefore, he had paid in Social Security. So he passed first, and then she was able to draw what is called survivor's benefits. And so the little money that she received every month was her survivor's benefits from Social Security. God forbid if she had never remarried, then it would have been totally on us to make sure that she survived. She wouldn't have had anything come in, right? So how can you abuse that? What you going to do with that? That was all she had to survive. Food, shelter, and then, of course, Medicaid, Medicare was there to help with her medical. And thank God for that. I thank God for Medicaid. I thank God for Medicare. And I thank God for every senior that is able to receive it today. And I pray that we fight with all of our might that nothing happens to it because they need it. They need it. All right, guys. In Rochester, and I don't know where you are, and again, I'm going to put all of these in the description box there for you. I think I put some in already. But in Rochester, we have a agency called Lifespan. Lifespan. And what is that? It's a trusted nonprofit offering services for older adults and caregivers, including elder abuse prevention and advocacy. And in Rochester, that is located on 1900 South Clinton Avenue. There's a phone number for that. And again, I will put that in the description box. And that phone number is 585-244 8400 8400. There is another one in Rochester, and it is called the Catholic Family Center. the Catholic Family Center. And what does that do? It provides comprehensive family services, including support for elder abuse victims. Okay? So if you know about any of this, you can call. And I also want to give you a national domestic violence hotline that I think you can do it anonymously, that you can call and report if you feel that someone is being abused. And as you saw on one of the videos, the doctor said, usually they come out with a team. There's usually a doctor as well as the others to come and assess the situation to find out what is going on in this elder abuse request. Okay? So the Catholic Family Center, did I give you that one? All right. That is 585-546-7220. And that's the Catholic Family Center. And this is located in upstate New York, Rochester. Please, the national hotline will cover you wherever you are, or you'll need to find out what you have in your area as you're listening, because I know we have new listeners every day, and I know that people are listening from all over the world. Now, the ones of you that are out of the country, thank you. Thank you, subscribers all from Africa and in all the different places that you're listening and you commute with me from. I do not know what services you have in your area. You'll have to look that up. But you do need to be aware of elder abuse. And the last one I have as a resource is on here, as well as I'm going to give you the national domestic, is again the Catholic Charities Family and Community Services, and that is local as well. It offers programs to strengthen families and address elder abuse. Now, that is located on 1099 J Street, Suite 100J, and that's in Rochester, New York. And to my knowledge, this information is up to date because I just researched it today. Their number is 585-339-9800. 585-339-9800. Now, for the ones of you, for that national hotline, it is the National Domestic Violence Hotline. That is a 1-800-799-7233. 1-800-799-7233. Yeah. Now, there are some website links that I can put in, and I'll just put those into the description box there. So we've talked about the different types of abuse, and yeah, I want to see one more time. Bear with me, guys, and see. I don't want that. I'm looking for something. Let me go out here and see if I can find that third clip. And if I can't, we'll see it another time. So this one, I don't know. I don't want to play in the same one. Can't find that third clip.
I think it's
I
especially
think this is it,
challenging
guys.
when it's a child or a grandchild. And the easiest way I can describe it is for the older adult, he, she, they remember that child or grandchild as a baby and as a toddler and maybe as a mouthy teenager and up through all those other stages. And nobody wants to believe that their child or grandchild would do anything to harm them. It's difficult to leave that. Part of what we have seen a lot of is that it's not been uncommon to have an adult child or a grandchild to move back in. There's usually financial exploitation going on. There's usually some form of neglect, sometimes physical, not as often, but sometimes sexual. And what we've discovered with that is if the financial exploitation comes forward and is recognized, there seems to be a systemic response to that. But we also notice that sometimes questions aren't being asked of other forms of abuse. and it won't be until a long time later that we may, in fact, hear about it.
I think when the abuser is your adult child, I think there is increased shame and guilt, feeling like you're a bad parent, that somehow it is your fault, that you should have maybe done something differently. I think there is the fear of reaching out for help and having that adult child go to jail. I think that is a difficult journey for any parent to go through, to have a child go to jail.
I think it's extremely hard for an elder to hold their children and their grandchildren accountable. We have a lot of difficulties in our tribal communities where we have grandparents raising their grandchildren. And as a result of those relationships, some of the abuse is taking place. And they don't want to force that child into a system that might be punitive, and don't want to do that kind of harm to that person. So they struggle with wanting to protect their child or their grandchild while wanting to be safe.
Well, the very obvious thing that comes to mind is you can't divorce your child. It's your child. They're your flesh and blood. And so when the abuse is perpetrated by an adult child, I have found it is much harder for women to cope with. They don't want to call law enforcement. They don't want to turn them in. Then they sometimes question themselves, what kind of mother am I that I raised a child that can do this to me? So it is definitely more challenging, and validating that to her, I think is very important. I think it's important that we acknowledge the hurt that they must be feeling, the betrayal that they must be feeling. Once again, it's that whole belief system of what kind of person am I to raise somebody like this? And always, it's imperative that we remind them that it's not their fault.
I think that's the most delicate time for a woman or a man to realize that the child or the grandchild that they're responsible for, the child that they raise, is now victimizing them. Themes about transgenerational abuse arise. How did we get to this point? Are they mirroring activities or behaviors that I exposed them to? There's a lot of shame and guilt around how did we get this far? Maybe I shouldn't have stayed. Now my children are doing this to me. Can I really ask for help now, knowing that I exposed them? They've witnessed these behaviors and I love them. So I'm going to call the police. When should I call the police? Why should I call the police? I'm really the reason why we're in this situation in the first place. And they need help. And I need to help them by any means necessary, because this love is a love that, is a love from birth.
They may also feel like they don't want the relationship to end. They don't want their relationship with their child to end. They're looking for help in ending the violence. And the extent to which we as advocates can help survivors negotiate when it's possible to save the relationship in the face of violence and when it's not is an important role that I think advocates play.
Wow, guys. Wow. This is amazing. That's very touching. It almost brings tears to your eyes when you think about some of the things that she was saying. Did I cause this? And I don't know, because, as a parent, you would have to know how you feel and if you've ever